welcome to the Digital Society Talks 2021, organized by the Digital Society Lab at the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory, University of Belgrade, and supported by United Group. Digital Society Talks is a forum of open dialogue between scientists, technology leaders, business experts, policymakers, around the issues shaping digital society in which we live in. We think it's important to have people from humanities and IT in a constant discussion about the future of societies under the influence of AI technologies. That's why this year's topic is Welcome to the AI World. We're eager to present our research for this year, together with panel discussions on the impact of AI to the future of societies, ethical AI, insights and challenges, digital technologies in arts and culture, and world before and after influencers. Thank you very much. I would call Marija Dankulov from the Institute of Physics. She will talk about our paper on weather and how it impacts mood. Marija is online, so she will start her short presentation.
Hi. May I? Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Hi.
go on.
So I'll tell you a little bit about what we have done in a previous year. So we know from the previous research that extreme events such as terrorist attacks influence the mood and expressiveness on Twitter and on other social media. We also know that temperature influences our positive and negative emotions. We are usually the most positive during this period when the temperature is between 20 and 30 degrees, with the peak around 25 degrees, which is kind of expected thing, yeah? So what we have done is that we had 3 questions in our research. So we asked ourselves, what about other weather variables, such as humidity, pressure, the volume of snow, or wind speed? We also asked ourselves, what about other psychological categories that can be actually extracted from text of the tweets. And the third question that we had is how this actually expands how universal our findings are, whether there are similar patterns found in different countries, or we actually can find some differences. So what we have done, we actually extracted around 30 million tweets for 10 different countries, including USA, UK, Russia, Serbia, and Germany for the period of 240 days. So this is approximately 8 months period. We also collected the data for average daily changes of weather variables such as humidity, temperature, pressure, rain and snow, volume, wind speed. And we also used Lift's dictionaries to extract different kinds of psychological categories from the text. What we have found is that there are around 430 very strong correlations, out of which 9 are very strong, 170 are kind of mild or middle strength correlations, and there are around 250 weak correlations between these variables. What we have found is that actually humidity, temperature, and pressure are the variables that are the mostly correlated with post count or activity on Twitter and psychological categories. We also found that different countries have these different kind of patterns. Specifically, we found that the strongest correlations are found for US, Portugal, and Italy. Our analysis shows that parameters, the psychological categories that have the strongest correlations with weather changes are post-count, sense, and effect. So post-count was strongly connected to changes in the temperature and humidity in all countries. But we actually have noticed that there are certain differences. For these reasons, we applied complex network theory to explore more of these differences. So for each country, we created one network in which nodes are represented by weather variables, post counts, and these different kind of psychological categories, while links represent the correlations for a period of 8 days between these different variables. These networks have a very prominent community structure, meaning that they are groups of variables that cluster together. Based on the content of these different communities, we found that countries can be classified into three different groups that have some specific patterns of these communities. Our findings indicate that weather conditions definitely influence activity, mood, and expressiveness on Twitter. But what we else found is that actually there are clear differences between countries, and we need to include this when we want to model and make algorithms that predict the activity and mood expressiveness on the Twitter. Thank you.
Thank you, Marija. So I guess we can predict the post count based on some weather parameters. That is the thing I'm so excited about, and this can have application in marketing. And post count means how much people post online. That's the thing that depends from the weather, humidity, and temperature. That's what we found. And this is the first research on so many countries that included all these parameters from lived psychometric dictionaries. Okay, so thank you very much, Marija. Now, Lana will talk about our work on power of media. We tried to examine also big corpus of tweets and to analyze how media influence Twitter users in terms of emotions, etc., etc. But Lana will tell you a few words about that.
Yeah. Hello, I'm to present myself firstly. I'm Lana Tucakovic. I'm a PhD student in psychology, and I'm a scholarship holder of the Ministry of Education, Science and Technological Development of the Republic of Serbia. And I'll present to you a study done by our coordinator, Ljubisa Bojic. And as he said, it's an analysis of the power of media and a look analysis, which look was previously mentioned by Marija, and in the impact of news portals and explanation through emotional accommodation theory. And it was done on Twitter. We did a quantitative analysis of 20 leading news portals in Serbia, and also we did we sampled the tweets from their follows, in that way including more than 500,000 tweets. Those tweets were sampled using Twitter's application programming interface, or shortly named Twitter API, and our tool for analysis was the, as previously mentioned by Marija, linguistic inquiry and word count. It's more precisely Serbian version, and its acronym is named LUK. And LUK contains multiple linguistic and psychological categories. And we used the tweets, and then we extracted the words from tweets, and we categorized it into different LUK categories. After that, we counted how many words fall into which LUK category in a day. The main finding that we found was that news portals are high in emotional processes, such as positive and negative emotions. And in terms of words used in news portals, it was found that they use a lot of words related to emotions, as I previously mentioned, but also they say words related to society and economy, like words related to money, work, achievement, and related to friends and related to religion. Also, and in that way we can show that news portals are influence people through emotions, but also we have found that news portals use words that are related to our senses, such as our sense of hearing and sense of seeing. and in that way they can transfer their message more precisely to the public. Also, they use a lot of words related to motion and space and everything, which is also related to news reporting, because time and space is important in that. In addition, we have found that not only that they influence in that way to their followers, but words that they use will predict words that their followers will use. More precisely, if they use a lot of words related to positive and negative emotions, their followers will also use those words, but also they will use a lot of words related to friends and to our senses, like hearing, and also to work and religion. These categories, such as emotions, here, and they all belong to categories that are psychological processes, but also they will use words that are related to religion and work, which belong to some things that are personal concerns defined by previous research, and in that way we can this is in line with previous findings, because research has found that when the news media propagates negative emotions, also their followers will have negative emotions expressed in their tweets. So that would be all. We can move now to the next speaker.
Thank you, Lana. So it's very important to know that everything we're exposed to creates these similar categories and topics in our tweets that are unrelated to the content that we are exposed to originally. So this study was very unique because it included all the categories from the linguistic dictionary, not only negative emotions. And we found that mass media impact in various ways, not only by spreading a negative mood among population. So next speaker is Nemanja Nikolic. He will tell us about state versus anti-vaxxers, analysis of COVID echo chambers in Serbia, the paper we presented at the conference, and the papers that was accepted by one international journal. Nemanja, can you tell us a few words about it?
I will try. Hi everyone, my name is Nemanja. I'm a PhD candidate in psychology and holder of scholarship at Ministry of Education. I think it's one of those moments when I have to admit myself that I have social phobia for real, so I will be very brief. The research was motivated by the event that happened on April this year. It's about apprehension of Dr. Jovana Stojkovic. She was accused for spreading panic, and due to that, her social media accounts were suspended as well. For those who are maybe not familiar with the context, she's a proponent of anti-vaccination attitudes, a kind of anti-vaxxer icon here. So we wanted to see how public will react on that event. So we collected 4 different online media outlets and 2 podcasts as well to do content analysis in order to identify existence of potential echo chambers, especially anti-vaxxer echo chambers among comments. Perhaps I should explain the concept of echo chamber a little bit. You can imagine echo chamber as a bubble of people who consisted of people who share similar or even identical opinion about some certain topics. And within this bubble, you don't have ground for different opinion, for dialogue. And therefore, we conducted content analysis. Sorry, let's try. Okay, so we did content analysis, and what we got that among followers of right-wing podcast, there is a great amount of comments which supports Dr. Jovana Stojkovic and disapprove police measures against anti-vaxxers, and also they show a great variety of conspiracy mentality amongst them, which is contrary to followers of, let's say, anti-regime media, which supports, which doesn't support apprehension of Dr. Jovana Stojkovic, and also show distrust in government and crisis response team. So that's the brief results about the research for those who are more interested in theories in how fake news influence creation of echo chambers and how it leads to social polarizations. You can find out more in our article, which is going to be published next year in the European Journal for Communication. So that will be all.
Thank you, Nemanja. It's very important for us to analyze echo chambers and to be aware of this as effect of recommender algorithms. So the problem is not about the content, the fake news. The problem is about the roots, and that is recommender algorithms. And we will talk about that a little bit later. Vera is next. She will talk about digital meme culture of ex-Yugoslav region. So this is going to be interesting and I guess a little bit funny because she has a nice presentation.
Okay, hello everybody. I'll just share my screen here. Just a second. Yeah. We're now moving to something a little bit different. So I don't come from the field of the social analysis field or psychology, but come from humanities disciplines and mostly media theory or just content and context analysis. So the main goal of the research I did, and we'll shortly present here, is to better understand meme culture on the internet in post-Yugoslav context. My main question is whether we can find subversive behavior on a collective participatory scale in meme culture, specifically in the context of ex- and post-Yugoslav conflict, ethnic conflicts. Internet memes are bits of digital culture which come from a creative engagement with videos, texts, and images on the internet. As Limor Schiffman points out, memes are not single pieces of work as the one we see on the screen, but groups of digital items sharing common characteristics created with awareness of each other, after which they are circulated, imitated, and transformed by many internet users. Mimetic practices also create shared digital cultural space and values among users, which means distinct culture and communities. However trivial they may seem, their viral nature shows us that they are not insignificant parts of digital culture. Meme culture is loaded with symbols, political and popular culture references, but what defines it the most is humor and its internal and often bizarre self-referentiality, which makes most memes incomprehensible for those unfamiliar with the vernacular, such as the case with the so-called "this man" meme reference on the slide. Now, researchers like Valentina Tani revealed how this creative practice of meme creation and sharing has many things in common with avant-garde artistic movements of the 20th century, such as the remixing of images and meaning, use of intertextuality and parody, and that this amateur culture should be read as a peak of the avant-garde striving for blurring the lines between art and life, which also means the possibility of a deeper critical engagement with social norms and modes of collective action. Now, my research focused on one specific artistic strategy called Subversive Affirmation, or over-identification strategy, tied to the practices of Slovenian art collective Neue Slovenische Kunst in 1980s Yugoslavia. It is tied to the idea that in modern societies, even the harshest criticism is being co-opted, appropriated, and rendered ineffective by the system which is being criticized. For this reason, some artists believed that what is needed is a revolution of the yes, or in terms of Neue Slovenische Kunst practice, becoming more totalitarian, xenophobic, fascist than the system which propagates such beliefs. The effect of this strategy is that it forces us to look inward at our own position, it confuses the system which is never meant to be taken that seriously, and it forces revelation of the underlying ideologies and their ultimate consequences. Now, I will shortly address here the case of a Reddit community called I'm Too Balkan for You, which is especially representative of the over-identification practice we are discussing, and is present in meme communities of ex-Yugoslavia on YouTube, Facebook, and Reddit, which I covered in my research. Reddit, similarly to other anonymous forums like 4chan, is an aggregate of meme content. The group, which has 100,000 members, is defined as a group for ultra-nationalistic ironic memes Balkan people would agree with unironically. We can see in this group frequent themes of Western Euro-Balkan divide, self-orientalism, Christian-Muslim divide, with a strong racial and xenophobic language against Albanians and Turks, as well as concrete topics like Kosovo, conflict between Northern Macedonia and Greece, etc. I found that this whole Reddit community seems to be based on the idea of over-the-top identification with radical, nationalistic, as well as racial ideologies, and that it produces that uneasy feeling of ambivalence of meaning which subversive affirmation strategy is supposed to have. Also, specificities of today's internet culture, such as trolling practices and pose law, which states that without a clear indication of the author's intent, it is difficult or impossible to tell the difference between an expression of extremism and a parody of extremism, which further connects subversive affirmation strategy and meme culture. I will conclude shortly with the two directions of my considerations of these practices. So first, I deal with the usage of this kind of memes by the white nationalist supremacist online social movement called alt-right, which operated from 2010 until 2010, and an example of Remove Kebab or Serbia Strong meme, which besides its internet popularity, reached world fame when referenced by a shooter at two mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand in 2019, who killed 51 people and called himself kebab removalist in a live stream of his attack. The second line of analysis deals with the role and evolution of humor and irony in internet culture at large, and further theoretization of subversive affirmation strategy in dialogue with works of Slavoj Žižek, Alexei Monroe, Inke Arns, and Silvia Sase, focusing especially on the position of over-identification strategy, which says that it must exclude ironic imitation and ironic distance in order to be successful. Thank you.
Okay. As for myself, I'm not so a serious consumer of these memes. I just like the average dose of Serbian person. This is one of the profiles I think that is just for fun. Okay, thank you very much, Vera. And now Damir will present a paper that we did about interesting topic, because we are now faced with the dominance of tech companies in terms of their social power, and they are actually exercising that unofficial power, I guess. So he will talk about this Techno Feudalism illustrated by Trump's Twitter suspension and Australia versus Google and Facebook dispute.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Ljubisa. So, as Ljubisa said, my name is Damir Zejnulahovic. With Ljubisa and my colleague Miloš Jankovic from the Institute for Philosophy and Social Theory, we wrote a paper titled, rather dystopian, Techno Feudalism illustrated by Trump's Twitter suspension and Australia versus Google and Facebook dispute. This paper analyzes two events that happened in late 2020 and at the beginning of 2021, which are the suspension of Trump from Twitter and the Google and Facebook feud with the Australian government. Basically, the paper deals with the growing power, or let's rather say the manifestation of power and influence that social companies have on the political sphere, as well as their growing willingness to flex that power and flex their influence and flex their capital to mold societies in the way they see fit. I mean, that's nothing new when you talk about let's say companies or multinational companies, but it's new in the way they do it, and it's a new phenomenon in the way they express themselves and the pressures they put on societies and governments, especially in the information sphere. So the first event we analyzed was, as I said, Trump's suspension from Twitter. The suspension came after the Capitol Hill riots at the January 6th Twitter said that Trump was suspended because of glorifying violence, which may inspire others to repeat criminal acts committed in the U.S. Capitol on the 6th of January 2021. The thing that is special about this event is that at the time Trump was still the sitting president of the United States. He lost that election, and as we know, later on Joe Biden took power, but it doesn't actually matter. What matters is that the president of the United States, the world hegemon in the capitalist system, the most powerful figure in the world, was able to be suspended by a tech company. That shows a huge amount of pressure. And if we follow the free media thesis, Trump actually became president in large part because of his uses of social networks and social media. So the riots at the Capitol Hill had fatal outcomes, and they were essentially about one of the crucial backbones, ideological backbones of democratic societies, capitalist democratic societies, which is the elections and the legitimacy of the elections themselves. Because of that fact, we chose to use the Althusserian framework when analyzing the power that Twitter showed at that moment. So we recognize Twitter and social media as a new kind of technological innovation in the field of the information ideological state apparatus, which is used to secure and reproduce the mode of production and the reproduction of the entire society based on the capitalistic system of reproduction and production. To show that weeks later after this happened, the repressive state apparatus, the army, was called to the Capitol, thus showing that the state apparatus is the power of the state apparatus is formalized. What we witnessed in America at the beginning of the year is that the power of the media companies shifted from the traditional media such as news, TV and such to this new medium, the social network, which played a crucial role in securing the transfer of power. And once again, I must insist on this fact, it secured the transfer of power in the most dominant, the most powerful country in the world, thus taking the place of that once was occupied by news and other media such as newspapers and so on and so on. The second event was Facebook and Google's feud with the Australian government, which was about the draft law the Australian government proposed that focused on redistributing some of the earnings, some of the revenues that Facebook generate to the media companies that actually publish their pieces or information on Facebook itself. Of course, that didn't sit well with Google or Facebook, so they decided to fight this draft law. The theoretical framework, let's say, which we used to approach this problem was focused on sovereignty and the prerequisites of the democratic society. So Google and Facebook used two different strategies, let's say. Google opted to threaten capital withdrawal, which is a practice commonly used in the poorer countries, or let's say in third world countries, or whatever you want to call them, the South. So the fact that they used the threat of capital withdrawal shows that what's lacking is the integration of the political and the economic sphere, because that integration is a prerequisite of a democratic society, because basically it secures the fact that the will of the majority will be upheld, and that it disallows the leaving of the political community when we don't agree with the choices of the majority. On the other hand, Facebook took a different approach. They simply stopped showing any media content on their site, on their social medium, and that also put the Australian government in quite a tough predicament, because, as we know, the prerequisite and the basis of democratic legitimacy and sovereignty as a nation state rests on the democratic process, which must be upheld, because that's the only way the government itself gains legitimacy and gains sovereignty. Facebook's decision severed that link, because the Australian government had two choices. It had a choice to try to protect democracy, and by protecting democracy they had to suspend their sovereignty, because they would bow to the will of a private multinational tech company actor. On the other hand, if they chose to use their sovereignty to respect the will of the people, which gained them sovereignty in the first place, they would have to essentially threaten one of the basic democratic principles, which is free access to media, or access to media, and free and fair elections, which are based on the fact that information is free and available. Of course, Facebook and Google at the end, let's say, won this feud, and they were exempt from the law that Australia at the end ratified. So, as we clearly showed in the paper, social media became the leading information ideological apparatus in the United States. It secured the transfer of power between, of course, two fractions of the ruling class. But in Australia, it showed its power even in one of the strongest, or let's say one of the toughest and strongest economies of the capitalist center, threatening capital withdrawal and severing the link between sovereignty and democracy, thus showing us that the power, influence, and the capital the social media companies wield is a force to be reckoned with in the world, and it requires deep analysis, because without the analysis of this problem, we can't understand the political implications of the modern world.
So, welcome to the new world. Okay, in 15 minutes we'll continue. We'll have a little break, and we have a question. Okay. Just a short question.
Yeah, just a short question. Where is the feudalism? Is it about the feud as a conflict, or?
Yeah, the question is, where is the feudalism?
Well, let's say feudalism is let's say a rather strong word. That's what I said in the beginning.
Yeah, but it's in
the head of Fianista Fox, but I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat?
Yeah, I say it's in the title of.
Yeah, it's in the title, and as I said at the beginning, the title sounds rather dystopian. And feudalism here, basically, techno feudalism is a new kind of idea. I mean, it's a little a reference to a possible dystopian society we can have, which is, let's say, right libertarians' dream world, in which I don't know what that was. Okay, in which tech companies can and will use their power to undermine every society in this world. That's where the feudalism comes from. I mean, we can imagine Google and Facebook's strongholds exercising power over the populace and people who work in them.
Maybe it's about our basic human rights to have this virtual identity that can be taken from us by a tech company. So in this new world, I guess we have two identities, and feudalism is about taking that right by a private company. Okay, we do have another question, and the mic is going to be passed. So, okay, let's hear that.
I have a question for Marija or Lana. How did you find Luke performing in Serbian language? Were you satisfied with the result compared to English or other languages? So, can you just
there is a dictionary in Serbian, Liv's dictionary. Right?
We already knew that it had good psychometric properties because it was also done by my previous mentor, Jovan Bjakic. It was also validated in the Serbian language, so you knew it was ready to use. So it has shown good in the Serbian language.
Any other questions for now? Okay, if not, please take the drinks. We have a 10 minutes break, and we're looking forward to the next discussion, the fireside chat. Stay tuned, folks.